Every offseason there seems to be a few teams that get a lot of hype. Besides the obvious choices like your Alabamas and stuff like that. I mean, there's a few teams that sort of under the radar teams that you hear people start talking a lot about in the offseason. Kentucky is one of those teams this season. Mizzou, Arizona State for a while until sort of the Herm Edwards stuff started bubbling up. That's kind of died down a little. Another one is Indiana. Now, sometimes when these teams start to pick up some hype and steam in the offseason and I look into it, I go, you know what? Maybe this is right. Maybe this team is going to have like a breakout year, a really good year, a surprise division winner or something like that. Sometimes I look into it and I go, I'm not buying it. In today's video, we're going to find out which is the case for Indiana. Let's go. Hey, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou. And guess what? I'm live for you on LouTube today. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. Also, and tune addition to that as well. Hey, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. Did you know I post college football videos almost every single day of the year? It's true. Some of them are even watchable. I don't know about this one. It's Indiana. Maybe if it was Indiana State, home of Larry Bird. Anyway, yeah, Indiana team preview and game-by-game prediction coming up right now. All right, I have to admit, after looking into Indiana today, I sort of understand the hype that has developed around Indiana in the offseason. I'm not saying I agree with it. We'll see when we get to the game-by-game predictions, but I understand it. Let's look at Indiana and what's going on. Well, they went 6-2 last year, so that is one reason people are excited about this year. You have a good year, people start to expect a good year the following year as well. Head coach Tom Allen was given a huge raise and extension after last year. He's now making $5 million a year. It's a lot for a head football coach at Indiana. They extended him through 2027. He beat Penn State, Michigan, and Michigan State last season. That's the first time Indiana has ever beat all three of those teams in the same season. They have 17 starters returning from the team that beat those three teams and went 6-2. They had a third-team All-American middle linebacker, probably the best linebacker to ever play at Indiana. He returns. They have a quarterback who put up really, really good numbers when he played and when he was healthy, and we'll talk more about that in a second. And they return a ton of talent on defense, especially across the defensive line and the linebacker position. Let's take a look at Indiana's offense and see what it's going to look like this year. Quarterback Michael Penix Jr., he's really, really good. He's accurate. He's got a good arm. He can make all the throws. He can't stay healthy. This is going to be his fourth season starting at Indiana. In each of his first three seasons, he has failed to reach the end of the season. And in all three seasons, he had season-ending surgery before the season ended. Most recently, a torn ACL caused him to miss all of spring practice this past spring. Now, missing spring practice for a quarterback who's going into his fourth year playing, not nearly as big of a deal as a quarterback missing spring practice who maybe has never started before, but still, there's a reason coaches like practice. There's a reason coaches like spring training, spring practice. So not ideal that he missed, but he is expected to be ready by the start of the season. He's got to stay healthy. He is a key to Indiana's offense. Now, not that they don't have anything else there. They do, and we're going to talk about some of that in a second. But the offense is going to go really as far as Michael Penix Jr. will take them. The backup has played okay. He actually completed a higher percentage of passes than Michael Penix Jr. did when he played, but they changed the offense around totally when Michael Penix Jr. isn't in the game. They go to more of a short, conservative, sort of time of possession type of offense with a bunch of short passes. It's just not the same offense. Indiana needs that quarterback to stay healthy. Running back Samson James comes back, and then you bring in a transfer from Southern Cal. What's his name? Stephen Carr. So pretty good 1-2 combination there at the running back. Great. I don't know about that, but two pretty good running backs. Indiana finished 12th last year in rushing in the Big Ten, although I feel like that was maybe more a product of their offensive line than it was lack of talent at the running back position. Maybe we'll see this year how that pans out if they're able to improve. I'll talk about the offensive line here in a second. Wide receiver, Ty Freifogel. I don't know where they come up with these names, but Ty Freifogel, unbelievable last year. Averaged 20 yards per catch for the season. And against Ohio State and Michigan State, he went for over 200. So he's having his biggest games in Indiana's biggest games. That's the best player you can possibly have. There are lots of players who play good against average or below average competition. When you find a player that plays at his absolute best against the best competition, those are the best players to have, and that's Ty Freifogel. Yeah, that's him. You also have two really talented sophomores. Indiana's going to have a really, really solid wide receiving core. Now on to the offensive line. You return 4 or 5 starters from last year on the offensive line, Indiana does. That's the good news. The bad news is they weren't very good last year. Offensive line was the worst position group on the team last year for Indiana. So it's good that you have some continuity in getting 4 of those 5 guys back, but they're going to have to play a lot better, the offensive line is, for Indiana this year. You're probably not going to get where you want to go. Even if Michael Penix Jr. stays healthy for the entire season, you're probably not going to get where you want to go in the Big Ten if you're the 12th best rushing team in the Big Ten. So the offensive line is going to have to play a little bit better. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Indiana's defensive front, its defensive ends, and its defensive tackles are going to be amazing this year. Maybe not the most talented or the best in the Big Ten, but top 3 or 4 for sure. In fact, they led the Big Ten in sacks last year with 25 as a team, and they get most of those guys back. They do have a new defensive coordinator, Charlton Warren. He comes from Georgia, actually, but they're going to keep the same scheme that they ran last year, which is a 4-2-5. Head coach Tom Allen likes to run that scheme for whatever reason. But you look across the defensive front there, you get a transfer in Ryder Anderson. It's kind of funny. Indiana played Ole Miss in the bowl game. They must have liked what they seen with Ryder Anderson because they went out and got him out of the transfer portal from Ole Miss after that game. So he transfers in to help you with your defensive ends. You also have James Head Jr. and Michael Ziemba on the outside. So 3 really, really good defensive ends. At defensive tackle, you have Elliott. And I'm going to try to say this name, Nofo Aga Natoto. Again, with these names. Look, I don't name these people, so it's not my job to say their names right. It's just my job to say them as wrong as I possibly can. But shout out to Nofo Agaga Toto, though. 2 vets in the interior there at defensive tackle. Like I said, helped Indiana lead the Big Ten in sacks last year with 25. Linebacker, I mentioned this at the beginning, Micah McFadden. In my opinion, the best linebacker that Indiana's ever had. A 3rd-team All-American. The guy is all-world. You're really good across the board, really, with the linebacker position. Defensive backs, you return a couple of your corners from last year. That's good news. They combined for 5 interceptions. You do lose 1 safety, so you have to find a way to replace that. But a lot of returning talent on both sides of the ball for Indiana this year, including a dynamic, game-changing QB. Let's put the schedule up on the screen for Indiana and see if the hype is real. All right, you start things off on the road at Iowa. I think this will be a great game. Iowa is sort of an outlier. You know, we're in an age in college football right now where you see a lot of basketball scores at the end of games. Teams scoring in the high 30s, 40s, even in some cases 50 points. It's just unreal the amount of points that people are scoring nowadays. And Indiana has a type of offense capable of putting up those types of numbers in certain circumstances. But it seems like every time you turn on an Iowa game, the score is 10-7. I know that's not actually true or accurate. It's just sort of the way it feels when you think about Iowa, right? It's a tough place to play. You have to play there. It's week 1. This is a toss-up game, in my opinion. I think the spread on this game is only 2 or 3 points, so that tells you right there they're expecting it to be a pretty close game. I'm giving this one to Iowa just because they're the home team. If this one was at Indiana, I would go with Indiana. I'm not really confident one way or the other in this pick here. I'm more confident in Indiana right now than I was before I sat down to make this video. After looking into Indiana and what they have coming back and sort of how the schedule sets up and, you know, Michael Penix Jr. hopefully being at 100%, I like Indiana's chances better in this game right now than I did an hour ago. But for the purposes of this video, since the game's at Iowa, I'm going to go with a loss in week 1 for Indiana. You're 0-1. A couple of non-con games, 3 in a row actually after that. You have Idaho at home. That's going to be a win. Cincinnati, a legitimate preseason top 10 team. They're ranked ahead of Indiana in every single poll you look at for good reason, in my opinion. I think Cincinnati has the best chance in the playoff era of any group of 5 team ever of making the playoffs in 2021. I wouldn't bet any money that it actually happens. I'm just saying we haven't seen a group of 5 teams start the season ranked this high in the playoff era, and they play some legitimate Power 5 teams, including Indiana and later Notre Dame. If Cincinnati runs the table and is 12-0, 13-0 with a conference championship at the end of the season, and 2 of those wins are against a ranked Indiana and a ranked Notre Dame, it's possible Cincinnati finds its way into a playoff. It would depend, of course, what happens with the other 4 or the other 5 Power 5 conferences. But it is possible. I think Cincinnati beats you. I just think they're a really good team. They get a lot back, too. They're sort of similar to Indiana in that they get a lot of talent back, but they lose a defensive coordinator. You get them at home. That's a huge benefit. I just think Cincinnati, as good as Cincinnati has been, they really haven't had a breakout win against a Power 5 team. They got throttled by Ohio State a couple of seasons ago. It was their only loss. Last year, they had an opportunity against Georgia in a New Year's Six Bowl at the end of the season, and they came up a little bit short. I just have a feeling this is the week they finally get it done and beat a Power 5 team. And unfortunately for Indiana, man, I think it's you. You're 1-2. Last non-con game of the year on the road at Western Kentucky, giving you a win there. And then you start the rest of your Big Ten schedule, and you started off on the road at Penn State. I know Penn State was bad last year, especially in the first half of the season. Luckily for you, you played them in the first half of the season. Everyone remembers they started out 0-5 or something like that, and then 0-5, I believe, and then won their last 4 games. So sort of a tale of 2 seasons for Penn State. There's no way Penn State is as bad as their record indicated last year. They just have too much talent, and I have too much respect for James Franklin as a coach. I just don't see any way possible Penn State isn't vastly improved, at least record-wise, over what we saw last year. And one of the ways that record is going to improve is by beating some of the teams this year that beat them last year. I think one of those teams is Indiana. Again, this is a road game. If to play them there, I'm giving this game to Penn State. Indiana totes another L. Then you have a bye week. Come out of your bye week, play Michigan State, win. I think you'll beat Michigan State. I'm still kind of down on them. I'm on the fence with Mel Tucker. He hasn't done anything as a head coach to impress me yet, neither at Colorado or Michigan State. Now, last year was his first year at Michigan State, so I'm giving him a little bit of pass for that because for a new coaching staff with the pandemic year, it was nearly impossible to implement new schemes and things like that. So maybe you give him a little bit of a pass, but I'm just not sold on Mel Tucker. I think Indiana gets the job done at home and beats Sparty. Then you have Ohio State. I just think Ohio State's a legitimate top 4 team. They're by far the most talented team in the Big Ten. They're one of the most talented teams in all of America. I know they have a new quarterback, but ask yourself this. Has it mattered who's played quarterback for Ohio State at any point in the last 6, 7, or 8 years? No. Their quarterback's going to have 4,500 yards and 40 or 50 touchdowns at the end of the year. It just happens every year. I can't see you beating Ohio State. I like that you get them at home, and I will admit we have seen Ohio State drop some of these games in the past and in the recent past. They lost one to Iowa where they actually got blown out, like 55-17 or something like that. They lost a close one to was it Purdue? They lost one to Purdue one year. So it can happen. By no means is this a guaranteed loss for Indiana, but I'm picking it as a loss in this prediction video. Then you have back-to-back road games at Maryland and at Michigan. I think you win both of those. I do think Maryland is an improved team this year. Not improved enough to beat Indiana, though. Like I said, I am a believer in Indiana in that I do think Indiana's a legitimately good team. But good teams lose games. Not this one, though. You'll win at Maryland, and I think you're going to win at Michigan, too. I think by this point in the season, things are not going to be looking good for Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. Just not a believer in what they're doing there. I think Indiana gets the win. Then you have a couple of home games against Rutgers and Minnesota. I think you win both of those. You're clearly a better team than Rutgers, even though Greg Schiano did impress me with what he was able to do in the last couple of years there at Rutgers, or last year, rather. In Minnesota, again, P.J. Fleck, very well-coached team, sort of like Indiana talent-wise. Not a whole lot of difference if you look at the recruiting rankings, really. I think you win. And this would be a good win, too. I think Minnesota's going to be a good team in the Big Ten this year. Not quite as good as Indiana, and you get them at home. I'm giving you a win. You finish things up on the road at Purdue, which could be Jeff Brom's last game as head coach at Purdue. I think he's on the hot seat, and if things go really bad for Purdue this year, he could find himself out of a job. I think you get the win on the road at Purdue. So you add that up and you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8-4 for Indiana. Not the record that Indiana fans want. I get it. However, in most years, Indiana would have been very, very happy with an 8-4 record. And I'll be honest, you could go 9-3 or 10-2. Maybe the only games you lose are Penn State and Ohio State. That's possible. But in my opinion, not likely. I think 8-4, the most likely record for Indiana in 2021. All right, I appreciate you guys watching this video. Have a good morning.